First of all, thank you for inviting me to present at this year's forum. It's a pleasure to be here and wonderful to see all the presentations today, including the Cheshire Cat, under these very difficult circumstances with the COVID-19 pandemic. I also want to express my sincere condolences to the USEA team on the passing of Barry Worthington. He was a great leader and an inspiration to many of us walking in his footsteps. Thanks to Sheila for stepping into those shoes. There is a growing excitement about geothermal energy. That excitement is based on the growing realization that the size of the prize is huge. When I spoke at this same forum last year, I was bold enough to predict a boom in the industry. 2020 was indeed a successful year from many different angles, despite the difficulties. We saw the beginnings of that boom, with many commentators now calling the 2020s the geothermal decade. I'm going to focus my comments at this forum onto a brief snapshot of what's been happening in the industry and some of the market opportunities. I'd like to begin by noting the big changes to our Geothermal Association last year, with Geothermal Resources Council now rebranded into Geothermal Rising, as Andrew mentioned. The core reason we did this rebrand is to broaden the appeal, conversation, narrative about geothermal energy. We also want to include in the conversation all three facets of geothermal energy, including electricity power generation, direct heat use for communities and commercial buildings, and geothermal heat pumps for heating and cooling homes and businesses. Earth's heat is ubiquitous. It's everywhere below our feet at all times. All we need to do is drill deep enough and we'll access a limitless supply of energy. Geothermal energy is the recovery of that heat that is then converted to electricity or used directly. It's a renewable energy source that emits very low greenhouse gases. Geothermal industries can be broadly split into four types, as shown here on this slide. Extraction of natural hydrothermal hot waters at temperatures usually well above 100 degrees C to generate electricity. Direct use of cooler water from greater depths for industrial and community heating systems, and geothermal heat pumps working at low temperatures with shallow installations to heat or cool individual buildings or houses. They are the geothermal equivalent to rooftop solar. The fourth type shown here are new technologies such as EGS, Enhanced Geothermal Systems, or AGS, Advanced Geothermal Systems. The industry is developing geothermal anywhere, anytime, researching and innovating our technologies and bringing in scalability across the USA and internationally. There are significant opportunities for collaboration across industries, not just with other renewable and clean sources of energy, but also with industries that are pivoting away from fossil fuels like oil and gas. We also have valuable connections with the mining industry in recovering critical minerals transported in geothermal brines. These minerals, such as lithium, are under increasing demand. In the electricity sector in 2020, we had 8 power purchase agreements, PPAs, signed in the geothermal industry. There have generally been 1 or 2 PPAs per year in the past. The PPAs have been for Hawaii, Utah, and 6 in California. They're long-term 20 to 30-year contracts providing stable revenue and return on investment. New technology development and benefits of scale are bringing down prices for geothermal power. The industry is already seeing contract prices decreasing towards $60 per megawatt hour. Prices in the range of $50 to $70 are realistic, and especially over the timelines considered. These prices are competitive when one considers that high penetration of intermittent renewables like solar and wind need to be combined with more costly storage technologies to provide more stable supplies. There's clearly excitement growing amongst our customers in these Western states, but geothermal projects do not just have to be restricted to these states. It's possible to expand geothermal energy across the country. So the key benefits of geothermal energy can really be boiled down to 3 things: fighting climate change, building jobs in the economy, and energy reliability and security. In those Western states, growth of geothermal power is being propelled by targets for renewable power standards, renewable portfolio standards, and greenhouse gas emissions, combined with an increased recognition of the value proposition it brings to the grid. The high reliability and security of geothermal energy is evidenced by the past industry performance. where geothermal power plants have supplied continuous baseload power through the entire night and daytime, and some plants have been operating for decades. Geothermal power also provides a host of other ancillary services that support the grid's function and resilience. As society transitions away from the traditional baseload energy sources like coal and gas, geothermal power plants are dispatchable and load following, making geothermal energy not only available 24/7, but also flexible to ramping down or up to help cover changing operational requirements through the day as intermittent renewables come off the grid. Geothermal power generation makes a significant impact to building jobs and providing economic benefits in local communities. For every 2 megawatts of geothermal development, there are 5 quality jobs created, the highest for any renewable energy. Operators pay local taxes and pay royalties for state and federal lands. The overall value proposition of geothermal power, including its price, reliability, and environmental footprint, is therefore becoming more and more attractive to utility customers, as evidenced by those 8 signed PPAs. These economic benefits will be sorely needed as society develops an economic recovery from the COVID-19 downturn. And it's clear that geothermal energy has a growing role in the energy mix as we transition away from fossil fuels. We are seeing a pivot in the oil and gas industry over to geothermal technologies. The synergies between the two industries are being realized in people, technologies, and infrastructure. This photo shows nickel alloy well casing ready to go down a new production well at the Salton Sea geothermal field in Imperial Valley, Southern California. It's a sign of economic progress and expansion in this field. I like this image as it also shows how our two industries naturally fit together and how both industries have opportunities to expand those relationships. Firstly, the type of people that are in both industries are like-minded. There are clear expertise overlaps with exploration and borehole operations that means the oil and gas workforce and talents fit well with geothermal. We both deal with the complexity of the subsurface to explore and engineer a reservoir thousands of feet down. Secondly, our technologies are very similar. In both cases, we need to construct a well to access that reservoir in the right place, at the right depth, and with the right well completion and control. And we have to extract the fluids and manage that reservoir at depth. And thirdly, there's a huge oil and gas infrastructure that could be put to good use in a growing geothermal industry. As well as hundreds of thousands of existing wells that could supply heat, there are service and supplier industries tuned to drilling and operating in the subsurface. I believe the oil and gas industry will naturally gravitate towards geothermal technologies and markets to fit their clean energy goals, and the well-educated and like-minded workforce from the oil and gas industry will naturally look for transferable jobs. This map shows the relative temperature distribution across the USA. Geothermal power production is focused on the western states where the most accessible resources are found. But the earth is hot everywhere. It's just how deep we can drill and the economics of recovering that heat that are critical to our expansion. In 2019, the US Department of Energy published their pivotal GeoVision study. The study shows there can be over 50 gigawatts of power capacity by 2050 if we enable cost-competitive geothermal expansion, which means that geothermal will provide 10% of total US electricity demand. To achieve this, we need to develop technologies that can be used across the nation and scale up these technologies so they can be used robustly and economically. We also need to make more effective use of our Earth's clean and renewable heat directly for our homes and businesses. By developing heat management through direct heat use and heat pumps, we can lower our overall electricity power consumption and facilitate a more sustainable and reliable electrification and decarbonization of our society. According to the DOE GeoVision study, we can include heat pumps in new builds and retrofit to existing buildings to reach 28 million installations by 2050. We can also install an estimated 17,500 district heating systems that supply heat directly to communities and industries. In electricity generation and direct use, that means building new projects in hydrothermal reservoirs where they can be found, as well as developing new technologies such as EGS and AGS that can be scaled up to work on recovering the heat from the rock. This is vast potential for economic expansion. The report notes that the right technology investment will catalyze $219 billion in domestic expenditures on geothermal energy through 2050. Total accessible EGS resources alone can in practice provide much more than 100 gigawatts of power according to the United States Geological Survey. These systems do not need hot water in place, but instead rely on enhancing natural permeability by pumping fluids continuously through a permeable reservoir in a giant natural heat exchanger that can be many thousands of feet deep. The main challenges with EGS are to develop the reservoir, access it economically, and control the fluids. The DOE's Forge project is situated in Utah and establishes an experimental field site to research, test, and demonstrate EGS technologies on the path to developing commercial projects elsewhere. It is receiving $190 million in continued funding over 5 years. The project recently completed drilling of the first production injection well. The well was drilled 50% faster as a result of careful planning, advanced bits, and specialized training and support from Texas A&M University. The DOE's Geothermal Technologies Office is also funding initiatives in lower temperature geothermal energy. DOE small business partners are lowering geothermal heat pump system costs by inventing new heat exchangers. Direct use feasibility studies have included several examples of how low temperature geothermal resources may be utilized east of the Mississippi. For example, the university will soon test direct use on their campus in Ithaca, New York, where, like most of the Northeast, heating demands outweighs electricity demand. That makes a district heating solution a uniquely strong fit for the region. West Virginia University is also in the process of deploying deep direct use technology to allow geothermal to be used as both a heat and energy source, which will save substantial costs for the university over the long term. Projects in reservoir thermal energy storage have examined how excess electrical energy provided to the grid by intermittent renewables can be stored as thermal energy in deep saline geothermal aquifers. Advanced geothermal systems like closed-loop technologies are being investigated by a number of startup companies in the geothermal industry. In this case, formation fluids are not extracted and instead a completely closed borehole system is used to extract the heat with the working fluid pumped down the well in return. For example, Ever Technologies has completed the first part of this demonstration project by innovatively connecting 2 horizontal wells drilled simultaneously to complete a loop. The key opportunities for these systems is their easy scalability by keeping the heat recovery encased within the borehole. We had a record year for geothermal energy with federal lawmakers in 2019, with 3 congressional hearings and 4 separate draft acts being published. Building on the bipartisan appeal of geothermal energy, all this activity culminated in Senators Murkowski and Manchin introducing the Agile Act into the Energy Act of 2020 that was authorized late last year. This was a huge success for the geothermal industry that we now need to build upon with appropriations that realize the enacted work package. Policies include increased research across different types of geothermal energy, especially establishing up to 3 more Forge-type experimental and demonstration sites, including one east of the Mississippi, investigating streamlined permitting processes and development of co-production with petroleum and mineral industries. We need to build upon this long-term thinking to encourage investment in the industry. We need longer-term tax credits that can be relied upon. We need programs that provide access to low-cost financing to help de-risk projects. And we need more streamlining of geothermal permitting and approvals. We want to accelerate shovel-ready projects that can lead to tens of thousands more jobs. An employment timeline in line with the targets in the GeoVision study would create as many as 44,300 new jobs by 2030. So to conclude, the geothermal industry is the future where geothermal power and heat can be rolled out across the nation as a critical and secure source of energy for US households and businesses. As our society decarbonizes and electrifies, then we will need renewable and clean energy sources that are always on, no matter what the time and whatever the weather. As we unlock Earth's heat, then geothermal energy will be expanding to anywhere and any time as we develop electricity power generation, direct heat use for communities and commercial buildings, and geothermal heat pumps for heating and cooling homes and businesses. Thank you so much for listening.